Welcome back. I will compare and both use the Book of Enoch and the 33rd degree Scottish Rite of Freemasonry to explain cosmology, not the typical mainstream version, but instead, I will reveal the occult version of cosmology of the ancients, long before religions. So let's start. 17th degree, initiate of the East and West. The image of Ahriman was the dragon, confounded by the Jews with Satan and the serpent tempter. After a reign of 3,000 years, Ormuzd had created the material world, in 0 periods, calling successively into existence the light, water, earth, plants, animals, and man. But Ahriman concurred in creating the earth and water, for darkness was already an element, and Ormuzd could not exclude its blaster. So also the two concurred in producing man. Ormuzd produced, by his will and word, a being that was the type and source of universal life. For everything that exists under heaven, he placed in man a pure principle, or life, proceeding from the Supreme Being. But Ahriman destroyed that pure principle, in the form wherewith it was clothed, and when Ormuzd had made, of its recovered and purified essence, the first man and woman, Ahriman seduced and tempted them with wine and fruits, the woman yielding first. Often, during the 3 latter periods of 3,000 years each, Ahriman and darkness are to be triumphant. But the pure souls are assisted by the good spirits. The triumph of good is decreed by the Supreme Being, and the period of that triumph will infallibly arrive, when the world shall be most afflicted with the evils poured out upon it by the spirits, or perdition. 3 prophets will come to bring relief to mortals. Sosriska, the principle of the 3, will regenerate the earth, and restore to it its primitive beauty, strength and purity. He will judge the good and the wicked. After the universal resurrection of the good, he will conduct them to a home of everlasting happiness. Ahriman, his evil demons, and all wicked men will also be purified in a torrent of melted metal. The law of Ormuzd will reign everywhere. All men will be happy, all, enjoying unalterable bliss, will sing with Suzish, the praises of the Supremo Being. These doctrines, the details of which were sparingly borrowed by the Jews, were much more fully adopted by the Gnostics, who taught the restoration of all things, their return to their original pure condition, the happiness of those to be saved, and their admission to the feast of heavenly wisdom. The doctrines of Zoroaster came originally from Bactria, an Indian province of Persia. The 24 good and 24 evil deities, enclosed in the egg, are the 48 constellations of the ancient sphere, equally divided between the realms of light and darkness, on the concavity of the celestial sphere, which was apportioned among them, and which enclosing the world and planets, was the mystic and sacred egg of the Magi, the Indians, and the Egyptians, the egg that issued from the mouth of the god Neph, that figured as the Orphic egg in the mysteries of Greece, that issued from the god Tumung of the Coesians, and from the Egyptian Osiris, and the god Phanes of the modern Orphics, principle of light, the egg crushed by the sacred bull of the Japanese, and from which the world emerged, that placed by the Greeks at the feet of Bacchus, the bull-horned god, and from which Aristophanes makes love emerge, who with night organizes chaos. Thus the balance, the scorpion, the serpent of Ophiuchus, and the dragon of the Hesperides, became malevolent signs and evil genii, and entire nature was divided between the two principles, and between the agents or partial causes subordinate to them. Hence Michael, and his archangels, and Satan, and his fallen compeers, hence the wars of Jupiter, and the giants, in which the gods of Olympus fought on the side of the light god, against the dark progeny of earth and chaos, a war which Proclus regarded as symbolizing the resistance opposed by dark and chaotic matter to the active and beneficent force which gives it organization, an idea which in part appears in the old theory of 2 principles, one innate in the active and luminous substance of heaven, and the other in the inert and dark substance of matter that resists the order and the good that heaven communicates to it. Typology, transliteration, allegory, the Book of Enoch, 69,2, the original 21 elders, or 21 constellations, messengers, and these are their names, The first of them is Shemiatsa, the second Artukifa, and the third Ama-En, the fourth Kokaba-El, the fifth Tru-El, the sixth Rumiel, the seventh Daniel-El, the eighth Nuku-El, the ninth Baraki-El, the 10th Azazel-El, the 11th Amaros, the 12th Batuel, the 13th Basaziel, the 14th Hanana-El, the 15th Ta-El, and the 16th Semabsia-El, the 17th Yetro-El, the 18th Chuma-El, the 19th Juriah-El, the 20th Rami-El, the 21st Azazel-El. 24th degree, Prince of the Tabernacle. Tombs of Osiris and Isis. On one was this inscription: I am Isis, queen of this country. I was instructed by Mercury, no one can destroy the laws which I have established. I am the eldest daughter of Saturn, most ancient of the gods. I am the wife and sister of Osiris, the king. I first made known to mortals the use of wheat. I am the mother of Horus the king. In my honor was the city of Bubast built. Rejoice, O Egypt, rejoice, land that gave me birth. And on the other was this: I am Osiris the king, who led my armies into all parts of the world, to the most thickly inhabited countries of India, the north, the Danube, and the ocean. I am the eldest son of Saturn. I was born of the brilliant and magnificent egg, and my substance is of the same nature as that which composes light. There is no place in the universe where I have not appeared, to bestow my benefits, and make known my discoveries. The rest was illegible, to aid her in the search for the body of Osiris, and to nurse her infant child Horus. Isis sought out and took with her Anubis, son of Osiris, and his sister Nephthys. He, as we have said, was Sirius, the brightest star in the heavens. After finding him, she went to Byblos, and seated herself near a fountain, where she had learned that the sacred chest had stopped which contained the body of Osiris. 25th degree, Night of the Brazen Serpent. In the spring, the year or sun god appears as Mithras, or Europa, mounted on the bull, but in the opposite half of the zodiac, he rides the emblem of the waters, the winged hone of Nestor, or Bostod, and the serpent, rising heliacally, at the autumnal equinox, besetting with poisonous influence. The cold constellation, Sagittarius, is explained as the reptile in the path who bites the home's heels, so that his rider falls backward. The same serpent, the Oan, Aphronos, or Muse Aros, of Synchylus, was the midget serpent, which Odin sunk beneath the sea, but which grew to such a size as to encircle the whole earth. For these Asiatic symbols of the contest of the sun god with the dragon of darkness and winter were imported not only into the zodiac, but into the more homely circle of European legend, and both Thor and Odin fight with dragons, as Apollo did with Python, the great scaly snake, Achilles with the Scamander, and Bellerophon with the Chimera, in the apocryphal book of Esther. Dragons herald a day of darkness and obscurity, and St. George, of England, a problematic Cappadocian prince, was originally only a varying form of Mithras. Jehovah is said to have cut Rahab and wounded the dragon. The latter is not only the type of earthly desolation, the dragon of the deep waters, but also the leader of the banded conspirators of the sky, of the rebellious stars, which, according to Enoch, came not at the right time, and his tail drew a third part of the host of heaven, and cast them to the earth. Jehovah divided the sea by his strength, and broke the heads of the dragons in the waters. And, according to the Jewish and Persian belief, the dragon would, in the latter days, the winter of time, enjoy a short period of licensed impunity, which would be a season of the greatest suffering to the people of the earth. But Ho would finally be bound or destroyed in the great battle of Messiah, or, as seems intimated by the rabbinical figure, of being eaten by the faithful, be, like Ahriman, or Vasuki, ultimately absorbed by and united with the principle of good. Typology, transliteration, allegory, the Book of Enoch, 18:13, the mystic and sacred egg of the Magi, the Orphic egg, is also the Shemaim. I saw the 7 stars, like great burning mountains, and to me, when I inquired regarding them, the messenger said, "This place is the end of the Shemaim, and earth. This has become a prison for the stars, and the host of the Shemaim, and the stars, which roll over the fire, are they which have transgressed the commandment of Most High, in the beginning of their rising, because they did not come forth at their appointed times, and he was wroth with them, and bound them till the time when their guilt should be completely ended, for 10,000 years. Typology, Enoch, equals this has become a prison for the stars, and the host of the Shemaim. Typology, transliteration, allegory, the Book of Enoch, 18,6, the 7 great burning mountains, or the planets, archangels. I saw at the end of the earth the firmament of the Shemaim above. And I proceeded and saw a place which burns day and night, where there are 7 mountains, of magnificent stones, 3 towards the east, and 3 towards the south. And as for those towards the east, one was of colored stone, and one of pearl, and one of jacinth, and those towards the south of red stone, but the middle one reached to the Shemaim, like the throne of Elohim, of alabaster, and the summit of the throne was of sapphire. The Enoch, 80, and in those days the messenger Uriel answered and said to me, See, I have shown you all matters, Hanok, and I have revealed all to you that you should see, this sun and this moon, and the leaders of the stars, of the Shemaim, and all those who turn them, their tasks and times, and departures, and in the days of the sinners the years shall be shortened, and their seed shall be late on their lands and fields, and all on the earth shall alter, and shall not appear in their time, and the rain shall be kept back, and the Shemaim shall withhold. And in those times the fruits of the earth shall be backward, and shall not grow in their time, and the fruits of the trees shall be withheld in their time, and the moon shall alter her order, and not appear at her time, and in those days the sun shall be seen, and he shall journey in the evening, on the extremity of the great chariot in the west, and shall shine more brightly, than accordance with the order of light, and many chiefs of the stars shall transgress the order, and these shall alter their orbits and tasks, and not appear at the seasons prescribed to them. All the country was agreed for settled objects, but some of them marching from the east arrived at a plain in the bush land, and halted there. Then each said to his neighbor, Come, let us set to work making bricks, and see that they are properly burnt, and bricks shall serve us for stone, and petroleum for mortar. So they agreed, We will build here for ourselves a city, and a tower, whose top shall reach the sky. Thus we will make a beacon for ourselves, so that we may not be scattered over all the surface of the country. But a chief came down to inspect the city, and the tower which the sons of men had built. And the chief said, You see, all these people are united in the same purpose, and having begun to do this, they will not be restrained from anything they determine upon. I will go down and frustrate their designs, so that one will not listen to another's proposals. So the chief scattered them over the surface of the whole country, and they abandoned the building of the city. They therefore called its name Babel, because it was there that the chief confused the designs of all the country. Thus from there, Lord scattered them over all the surface of the land. 27th degree, Knight Commander of the Temple, or Teutonic Knight of the House of Street Mary of Jerusalem. And hence came the enigmatical expression the serpent engenders the bull, and the bull the serpent, alluding to the 2 adverse constellations, answering to tile 2 equinoxes, one of which rose as the other set, and which were at the 2 points of the heavens through which souls passed, ascending and descending. By the serpent of autumn, souls fell, and they were regenerated again by the bull on which Mithras sate, and whose attributes Bacchus Zagreus, and the Egyptian Osiris, assumed, in their mysteries, wherein were represented the fall and regeneration of souls, by the bull slain and restored to life. Afterwards the regenerating sun assumed the attributes of Aries, or the lamb, and in the mysteries of Ammon, souls were regenerated by passing through that sign, after having fallen through the serpent. The serpent-bearer, or Ophiuchus, was Aesculapius, god of healing. In the mysteries of Eleusis, that constellation was placed in the 8th heaven, and on the 8th day of those mysteries, the feast of Aesculapius was celebrated. It was also termed Epidaurus, or the Feast of the Serpent of Epidaurus, the serpent massacred to Aesculapius, and was connected in various ways with the mythological adventures of Cis. So the libations to souls, by pouring wine on the ground, and looking towards the two gates of heaven, those of day and night, referred to the ascent and descent of souls, Cis and the serpent, Jupiter Ammon, and the bull, all figured in the mysteries of Bacchus. Suppose Aries, or Jupiter Ammon, occupied by the sun setting in the west, Virgo, Ceres, will be on the eastern horizon, and in her train the crown, or Proserpina suppose Taurus setting, then the serpent is in the east, and reciprocally, so that Jupiter Ammon, or the son of Aries causes the crown to rise after the Virgin, in the train of which comes the serpent, place reciprocally the sun at the other equinox, with the Balancia west, in conjunction with the serpent under the crown, and we shall see the bull and the Pleiades rise in the west, in conjunction with the serpent under the crown, and we shall see the bull and the Pleiades rise in the east. Thus are explained all the fables as to the generation of the bull by the serpent, and of the serpent by the bull, the biting of the testicles of the bull by the scorpion, on the Mithraic monuments, and that Jupiter made cause with child, by tossing into her bosom the testicles of Abans. To the mysteries of the bull-horned Bacchus, the officers held serpents in their hands, raised them above their heads, and cried aloud, Evi, the generic oriental name of the serpent, and the particular name of the constellation, in which the Persians placed even the serpent. The Arabians call it Reran, Ophiuchus, himself, Lama, and the brilliant star, in his head, Raslahua. The use of this word Eva, or Avod, caused Clemens of Alexandria to say that the priests in the mysteries invoked Eve, by whom evil was brought into the world. The mystic winnowing fan, encircled by serpents, was used in the feasts of Bacchus. In the Isiac mysteries, a basilisk twined round the handle of the mystic vase. The Ophites fed a serpent, in a mysterious ark, from which they took him when they celebrated the mysteries, and allowed him to glide among the sacred bread. The Romans kept serpents, in the temples of Bonades, and Aesculapius, in the mysteries of Apollo. The pursuit of Latona, by the serpent Python, was represented, in the Egyptian mysteries. The dragon Typhon, pursued Isis, according to Sanchoniathon, to Ort, the interpreter of heaven to men, attributed something divine to the nature of the dragon and serpents, in which the Phoenicians and Egyptians followed him. They have more vitality, more spiritual force, than any other creature, of a fiery nature, shown by the rapidity of their motions, without the limbs of other animals. They assume many shapes and attitudes, and dart with extraordinary quickness and force. When they have reached old age, they throw off that age and are young again, an increase in size and strength. For a certain period of years, the Egyptian priests fed the sacred serpents, in the temple at Thebes. Tuort himself had in his writings discussed these mysteries in regard to the serpent. Sanchoniathon said in another work, that the serpent was immortal, and re-entered into himself, which, according to some ancient theosophists, particularly those of India, was an attribute of the deity. And he also said that the serpent never died, unless by a violent death. The Phoenicians called the serpent Eilahudemon, the good spirit, and Neph was the serpent god of the Egyptians. The Egyptians, Sanchoniathon said, represented the serpent with the head of a hawk, on account of the swift flight of that bird, and the chief Hierophant, the sacred interpreter, gave very mysterious explanations of that symbol, saying that such a serpent was a very divine creature, and that, opening his eyes, be lighted with their rays the whole of firstborn space. When he closes them, it is darkness again. In reality, the hawk-headed serpent, genius of light, or good genius, was the symbol of the sun. In the hieroglyphic characters, a snake was the letter Zedora. It occurs many times on the Rosetta Stone. The horned serpent, which the hieroglyphic for a god. According to Eusebius, the Egyptians represented the world by a blue circle, sprinkled with flames, within which was extended a serpent with the head of a hawk. Proclus says they represented the four quarters of the world by a cross, and the soul of the world, or Neph, by a serpent surrounding it in the form of a circle. We read in Anaxagoras, that Orpheus said, that the water, and the vessel that produced it, were the primitive principles of things, and together gave existence to an animated being, which was a serpent, with two heads, one of a lion and the other of a bull, between which was the figure of a god whose name was Hercules, or Kronos, that from Hercules came the egg of the world, which produced heaven and earth, by dividing itself into two hemispheres, and that the god Phanes, which issued from that egg, was in the shape of a serpent. The Egyptian goddess Ken, represented standing naked on a lion, held two serpents in her hand. She is the same as the Astarte, or Ashtaroth, of the Assyrians. Hera, worshipped in the great temple at Babylon, held in her right hand a serpent by the head, and near she, also worshipped there, were two large silver serpents. In a sculpture from Kui-Unjik, two serpents, attached to poles arc near a fire altar, at which two eunuchs are standing. Upon it is the sacred fire, and a bearded figure lends a wild goat to the sacrifice. The serpent of the temple of Epidaurus was sacred to Asclepius, the god of medicine, and 462 years after the building of the city was taken to Rome after a pestilence. The Phoenicians represented the god Vomit, Linef or Amenfnef, by a serpent. In Egypt, a sun supported by two asps was the emblem of Herhat, the good genius, and the serpent with the winged globe was placed over the doors and windows of the temples as a tutelary god. Antipater of Sidon calls Amurt, the renowned serpent, and the Cerates is often found embalmed in the Thebaid. On ancient Tyrian coins and Indian medals, a serpent was represented, coiled round the trunk of a tree. Philhern, the serpent deity, was esteemed oracular, and the tripod at Delphi was a triple-beaded serpent of gold. The portals of all the Egyptian temples are decorated with the birogram of the circle and the serpent. It is also found upon the temple of Naki Rustan in Persia, on the triumphal arch at Pekin, in China, over the gates of the great temple of Chandidva, in Java, upon the walls of Athens, and in the temple of Minerva at Tea. The Mexican hierogram was formed by the intersecting of two great serpents, which described the circle with their bodies, and had each a human head in its mouth. All the Buddhist crosses in Ireland had serpents carved upon them. Wreaths of snakes are on the columns of the ancient Hindu temple at Boa Sanga. Among the Egyptians, it was a symbol of divine wisdom, when extended at length, and, with its tail in its mouth, of eternity. In the ritual of Zoroaster, the serpent was a symbol of the universe. In China, the ring between two serpents was the symbol of the world governed by the power and wisdom of the Creator. The Bacchans carried serpents in their hands or round their heads. The serpent entwined round an egg was a symbol common to the Indians, the Egyptians and the Druids. It referred to the creation of the universe. A serpent with an egg in his mouth was a symbol of the universe, containing within itself the germ of all things that the sun develops. The property possessed by the serpent, of casting its skin, and thus apparently renewing its youth, made it an emblem of eternity and immortality. The Syrian women still employ it as a charm against barrenness, as did the devotees of Mithra and Baba Zeus, the earthborn Evilizers of the early world. Phoi, Crops and Erechtheus were half man, half serpent. The snake was the guardian of the Athenian Acropolis. Nazos Phi, the brazen serpent of the wilderness, became naturalized among the Hebrews as a token of healing power. Bo ye, said Christ, wise as serpents, and harmless as doves. The serpent was as often a symbol of malevolence and enmity. It appears among the emblems of Shivaruds, the power of desolation and death. It is the bane of Apitas, Idman, Archemorus, and Philoctetes. It gnaws the roots of the tree of life in the Eddas, and bites the heel of unfortunate Eurydice. In Hebrew writers it is generally a type of evil, and is particularly so in the Indian and Persian mythologies. When the sea is churned by Mount Mandar rotating within the coils of the comical serpent Vaski, to produce the Amrita or water of immortality, the serpent vomits a hideous poison, which spreads through and infects the universe, but which Vishnu renders harmless by swallowing it. Ahriman in serpent form invades the realm of Ormuzd, and the bull, emblem of life, is wounded by him and dies. it was thought a religious obligation with every devout follower of Zoroaster to exterminate reptiles and other impure animals, especially serpents. The moral and astronomical significance of the serpent were connected. It became a maxim of the Zendavasts that Habman, the principle of evil, made the great serpent of winter, who assaulted the creation of Ormuzd. A serpent ring was a well-known symbol of time, and to express dramatically how time preys upon itself, the Egyptian priests fed vipers in a subterranean chamber, as it were as the sun's winter abode, on the fat of bull, or the year's plenteousness. The dragon of winter pursues Ammon, the golden ram, to Mount Casius. The virgin of the zodiac is bitten in the heel by serpents, who, with Scorpio, rises immediately behind Bar, and honey, the emblem of purity and salvation, was thought to be an antidote to the serpent's bite. So the boss of Erasmus, the emblems of nature's abundance, are destroyed through the agency of the serpent, and regenerated within the entrails of the vernal. But the sun god is finally victorious. Krishna crashes the head of the serpent Kalaya, Apollo destroys Python, and Hercules that Lunman monster, whose poison festered in the foot of Philoctetes, of Mopsus, of Kpuru, or of Sagittarius. The infant Hercules destroys the pernicious snakes, detested of the gods, and ever, as St. George of England, and Michael the Archangel, wars against hydras and dragons. The eclipses of the sun and moon were believed by the Orientals to be caused by the assaults of Admoa, in dragoon form, and they endeavored to scare away the intruder by shouts and menaces. This was the August Leviathan, or crooked serpent of old, transfixed in the olden time by the power of Jehovah, and suspended as a glittering trophy in the sky, yet also the power of darkness, supposed to be ever in pursuit of sun and moon. When it finally overtakes them, it will entwine them in its folds, and prevent their shining. In the last Indian avatars, as in the Eddas, a serpent vomiting flames is expected to destroy the world. The serpent presides over the close of the year, where it guards the approach to the golden fleece of Aries, and the 3 apples or seasons of the Hesperides, presenting a formidable obstacle to the career of the sun god. The great destroyer of snakes is occasionally married to them. Hercules, with the northern dragon, begets the 3 ancestors of Scythia, for the sun seems at one time to rise victorious from the contest with darkness, and at another to sink into its embraces. The northern constellation Draco, whose sensuosities wind like a river through the wintry bear, was made the astronomical cincture of the universe, as the serpent encircles the mundane egg in the Egyptian hieroglyphics. The Persian Ahriman was called the Old Serpent, the liar from the beginning, the Prince of Darkness, and the rover up and down. The dragon was a well-known symbol of the waters and of great rivers, and it was natural that by the pastoral Asiatic tribes, the powerful nations of the alluvial plains, in their neighborhood, who adored the dragon or fish, should themselves be symbolized under the form of dragons, and overcome by the superior might of the Hebrew god, as monstrous leviathans, maimed and destroyed by him. Ophanuus, in the old Greek theology, warred against Kronos, and was overcome and cast into his proper element, the sea. There he is installed as the Sikaloan, or dragon, the Leviathan, of the watery half of creation, the dragon who vomited a flood of water, after the persecuted woman of the Apocalypse. The deity of the early Jews talked to Adam and Eve in the garden. He conversed with Cain. He sat with Abraham in his tent. That patriarch required a visible token before he would believe in his positive promise. He allowed himself to be expostulated with, and his determination in regard to Sodom changed. By Abraham, he showed to Moses his person, though not his face. He is represented as dictating the minutest police regulations to the Israelites. He required and delighted in sacrifices and burnt offerings. He was angry, jealous, and revengeful, as well as wavering and irresolute. He allowed Moses to reason him of his fixed resolution to destroy the Israelites entirely. He commanded the performance of the most horrid and shocking sorts of cruelty and barbarity, the murder of men and women, and the violation of innocent virgins. Such were the popular notions of the deity, and no more unworthy and degraded ideas of God's nature were entertained by any people of antiquity. Either the priests took little trouble to correct these notions, or else the popular interest was not sufficiently enlarged to enable them to entertain any loftier conceptions of the Almighty. But such were not the ideas entertained by the intellectual and enlightened few among the Hebrews. It is certain that they possessed a knowledge of the true character, nature and attributes of God, as did the same class of men among the Egyptians and Phoenicians, as did Zoroaster, and Confucius, and Socrates and Plato. But their doctrines on this subject were esoteric. They did not communicate them to the people at large, but only to a favored few, as they were communicated in Egypt, Phoenicia, Greece and Samothrace. Is the greater mysteries, to the initiates. The communication of this knowledge constituted Masonry among the Jews. That was the lost word, which was made known to the grand, elect, perfect and sublime Masons. It would be folly to pretend that the forms of Masonry were the same then as now. Probably the very name of the order is a much later creation. The present titles, and the names of the degrees now in use were not then known, but, by whatever name it was then known, Masonry existed then as it exists now, the same in spirit and at heart, the supreme, self-existent, eternal, altwise, all-powerful, infinitely good, beneficent, and merciful Creator of the universe, was the same, by whatever name he was called, to the intellectual and enlightened men of all nations. To communicate true and correct ideas in regard to him, was the object of the mysteries. The Hiram, the king of Tyre, and Hiram-Abi, obtained their knowledge of him, and his nature. There it was taught to Moses and Pythagoras the deity, but not in that of the Holy Spirit or Holy Ghost, and commenced his epistola fundamentity in these words: Manes, apostle of Jesus Christ, elect of God the Father, behold the words of salvation, emanating from the living and eternal fountain. The dominant idea of his doctrine was pantheism, derived by him from its source in the regions of India and on the confines of China, that the cause of all that exists is in God, and at last, God is all in all souls are equal. God is in all, in men, animals and plants. There are two gods, one of good and the other of evil, each independent, eternal, chief of a distinct empire, necessarily, and of their very natures hostile to one another. The evil god, Satan, is the genius of matter alone. The God of good is infinitely his superior, the true God, while the other is but the chief of all that is the enemy of God, and must in the end succumb to his power. The empire of light alone is eternal and true, and this empire is a great chain of emanations, all connected with the Supreme Being, which they make manifest, all him, under different forms, chosen for one end, the triumph of the good. In each of its members lie hidden thousands of ineffable treasures, excellent in his glory, incomprehensible in his greatness. The Father has joined to himself those fortunate and glorious eons, aeones, whose power and number it is impossible to determine. This is Spinoza's infinity of infinite attributes of God. 12 chief eons, at the head of all, were the genii of the 12 constellations of the zodiac, and called by Manes, Olamin, Atan. Also, Lord of the Empire of Darkness, had an army of eons, or demons, emanating from his essence, and reflecting more or less his image, but divided and inharmonious among themselves. A war among them brought them to the confines of the realm of light. Delighted, they sought to conquer it, but the chief of the celestial empire created a power which he placed on the frontiers of heaven, to protect his eons, and destroy the empire of evil. This was the mother of life, the soul of the world, an emanation from the Supreme Being, too pure come in immediate contact with matter. It remained in the highest region, but produced a son, the first man, the Kaiamorts, Adam Kadmon, Hivalziva, Protos-Anthropos, and Evilziva, of the Zendavesta, the Kabbalah, the Gnosis, and Sabism, who commenced the contest with the powers of evil, but, losing part of his panoply, of his light, his son and many souls born of the light, who were devoured by the darkness, God sought to his assistance the living spirit, or the son of the first man, anthropoid, or Jesus Christ. The mother of life, general principle of divine life, and the first man, primitive being that reveals the divine life, are too sublime to be connected with the empire of darkness. The Son of Man, or soul of the world, enters into the darkness, becomes its captive, to end by tempering and softening its savage nature. The divine spirit, after having brought back the primitive man to the empire of light, raises above the world that part of the celestial soul that remained unaffected by being mingled with the empire of darkness, placed in the region of the sun and moon. This pure soul, the Son of Man, the Redeemer or Christ, labors to deliver and attract to himself that part of the light or of the soul of the first man, diffused through matter, which done, the world will cease to exist, to retain the rays of light still remaining among his eons, and ever tending to escape and return. By concentrating them, the Prince of Darkness, with their consent, made Adam, whose soul was of the divine light, contributed by the eons, and his body of matter, so that he belonged to both empires, that of light and that of darkness. To prevent the light from escaping at once, the demons forbade Adam to eat the fruit of knowledge, of good and evil, by which he would have known the empire of light, and that of darkness. He obeyed an angel of light, induced him to transgress, and gave him the means of victory. But the demons created Eve, who seduced him into an act of sensualism, that enfeebled him, and bound him, anew in the bonds of matter. This is repeated in the case of every man that lives, to deliver the soul, captive in darkness, the principle of light, or genius of the sun, charged to redeem the intellectual world, of which he is the type, came to manifest himself among men. Light appeared in the darkness, but the darkness comprehended it not. According to the words of Saint John, the light could not unite with the darkness. It but put on the appearance of a human body, and took the name of Christ in the Messiah, only to accommodate itself to the language of the Jews. The light did its work, turning the Jews from the adoration of the evil principle, and the pagans from the worship of demons. But the chief of the empire of darkness caused him to be crucified by the Jews. Still he suffered in appearance only, and his death gave to all souls the symbol of their enfranchisement. The person of Jesus having disappeared, there was seen in his place a cross of light, over which a celestial voice pronounced these words: "The cross of light is called the Word, Christ, the care, joy, the broad, the Son, the resurrection, Jesus, the Father, the Spirit, Lyra, truth and grace." With the Priscillianists, there were two principles, one the divinity, the other primitive matter and darkness, each eternal. Satan is the son and lord of matter, and the secondary angels and demons, children of matter. Satan created and governs the visible world, but the soul of man emanated from God, and is of the same substance with God. Seduced by the evil spirits, it passes through various bodies, until, purified and reformed, it rises to God and is strengthened by his light. These powers of evil hold mankind in pledge, and to redeem this pledge, the Savior, Christ the Redeemer, came and died upon the cross of expiation, thus discharging the written obligation. He, like all souls, was of the same substance with God, a manifestation of the divinity, not forming a second person, unborn, like the divinity, and nothing else than the divinity under another form. You have already learned that these ceremonies have one general significance, to everyone, of every faith, who believes in God, and the soul's immortality. The primitive men met in no temples made with human bands. God, said Stephen, the first martyr, dwelleth not in temples made with hands, in the open air, under the overarching mysterious sky, in their great world temple. They uttered their vows and thanksgivings, and adored the God of light, of that light that was to them the type of good, as darkness was the type of evil. All antiquity solved the enigma of the existence of evil, by supposing the existence of a principle of evil, of demons, fallen angels, an Ahriman, a Typhon, a Shiva, a Lek, or a Satan, that, first falling themselves, and plunged in misery and darkness, tempted man to his fall, and brought sin into the world. All believed in a future life, to be attained by purification and trials, in a state or successive states of reward and punishment, and in a mediator or redeemer, by whom the evil principle was to be overcome. and the Supremo Deity reconciled to his creatures. The belief was general that he was to be born of a virgin and suffer a painful death. The Indians called him Krishna, the Chinese, Khyentse, the Persians, Sosiash, the Chaldeans, Duvnai, the Egyptians, Horace Plato, Love, and the Scandinavians, Balder. Krishna, the Hindu Redeemer, was cradled and educated among shepherds. A tyrant, at the time of his birth, ordered all the male children to be slain. He performed miracles, any his legends, even raising the dead. He washed the feet of the Brahmins, and was meek and lowly of spirit. He was born of a virgin. It is not possible for us thoroughly to appreciate the feelings with which the ancients regarded the heavenly bodies, and the ideas to which their observation of the heavens gave rise, because we cannot put ourselves in their places, look at the stars with their eyes in the world's youth, and divest ourselves of the knowledge which even the commonest of us have, that makes us regard the stars, and planets, and all the universe of suns, and worlds, as a mere inanimate machine and aggregate of senseless orbs, no more astonishing except in degree, than a clock or an orrery. We wonder and are amazed at the power and wisdom. To most men it seems only a kind of infinite ingenuity of the Maker. They wondered at the work, and endowed it with life and force and mysterious powers and mighty influences. Memphis, in Egypt, was in latitude 28 degrees 5 north, and in longitude 38 degrees 18 east. Thebes, in Upper Egypt, in latitude 25 degrees 45 north, and longitude 328 degrees 43 east. Babylon was in latitude 32 degrees 30 north, and longitude 440.23 east, while Saba, the ancient Sabina capital of Ethiopia, was about in latitude 15 degrees north. Through Egypt ran the great river Nile, coming front beyond Ethiopia, its source in regions wholly unknown, in the abodes of heat and fire, and its course from south to north. Its inundations had formed the alluvial lands of Upper and Lower Egypt, which they continued to raise higher and higher, and to fertilize by their deposits. At first, as in all newly settled countries, those inundations, occurring annually and always at the same period of the year, were calamities, until, by means of levees and drains and artificial lakes for irrigation, they became blessings, and were looked for with joyful anticipation, as they had before been awaited with terror. Upon the deposit left by the sacred river, as it withdrew into its banks, the husbandman sowed his seed, and the rich soil and the genial sun ensured him an abundant harvest. Babylon lay on the Euphrates, which ran from southeast to northwest, blessing, as all rivers in the Orient do, the arid country through which it flowed, but its rapid and uncertain overflows bringing terror and disaster to the ancients, as yet inventors of no astronomical instruments, and looking at the heavens with the eyes of children. This earth was a level plain of unknown extent. About its boundaries there was speculation, but no knowledge. The inequalities of its surface were the irregularities of a plane, that it was a globe, or that anything lived on its undersurface, or on what it rested, they had no idea. Every 24 hours the sun came up from beyond the eastern rim of the world, and traveled across the sky, over the earth, always south of, but sometimes nearer and sometimes further from the point overhead, and sank below the world's western rim. With him went light, and after him followed darkness, and every 24 hours appeared in the heavens another body, visible chiefly at night, but sometimes even when the sun shone, which likewise, as if following the sun, at a greater or less distance, traveled across the sky, sometimes as a thin crescent, and thence increasing to a full orb resplendent with silver light, and sometimes more and sometimes less to the southward of the point overhead, within the same limits as the sun. Man, enveloped by the thick darkness of profoundest night, when everything around him has disappeared, and he seems alone with himself and the black shades that surround him, feels his existence a blank and nothingness, except so far as memory recalls to him the glories and splendors of light. Everything is dead to him, and he, as it were, to nature. How crushing and overwhelming the thought, the fear, the dread, that perhaps the darkness may be eternal, and that day may possibly never return if it ever occurs to his mind, while the solid gloom closes up against him like the wall. What then can restore him to life, to energy, to activity, to fellowship and communion with the great world which God has spread around him, and which perhaps in the darkness may be passing away? Light restores him to himself and to nature which seemed lost to him. Naturally, therefore, the primitive men regarded light as the principle of their real existence, without which life would be but one continued weariness and despair. This necessity for light, and its actual creative energy, were felt by all men. Nothing was more alarming to them than its absence. It became their first divinity, a single ray of which, flashing into the dark tumultuous bosom of chaos, caused man and all the universe to emerge from it. So all the poets sang who imagined cosmogonies. Such was the first dogma of Orpheus, Moses, and the theologians. Light was Ormuzd, adored by the Persians, and darkness Ahriman, origin of all evils. Light was the life of the universe, the friend of man, the substance of the gods and of the soul. The sky was to them a great solid concave arch, a hemisphere of unknown material, at an unknown distance above the flat level earth, and along it journeyed in their courses the sun, the moon, the planets, and the stars. The sun was to them a great globe of fire, of unknown dimensions, at an unknown distance. The moon was a mass of softer light. The stars and planets lucent bodies, armed with unknown and supernatural influences. It could not fail to be soon observed, that at regular intervals the days and nights were equal, and that two of these intervals measured the same space of time as elapsed between the successive inundations, and between the returns of springtime and harvest. Nor could it fail to be perceived that the changes of the moon occurred regularly, the same number of days always elapsing between the first appearance of her silver crescent in the west at evening and that of her full orb rising in the east at the same hour, and the same again, between that and the new appearance of the crescent in the west. It was also soon observed that the sun crossed the heavens in a different line each day, the days being longest and the nights shortest when the line of his passage was furthest north, and the days shortest and nights longest when that line was furthest south. That his progress north and south was perfectly regular, marking 4 periods that were always the same, those when the days and nights were equal, or the vernal and autumnal equinoxes, that when the days were longest, or the summer solstice, and that when they were shortest, or the winter solstice, with the vernal equinox, or about the 25th of March of our calendar. They found that there unerringly came soft winds, the return of warmth, caused by the sun turning back to the northward from the middle ground of his course, the vegetation of the new year, and the impulse to amateur reaction on the part of the animal creation. Then the bull and the ram, animals most valuable to the agriculturist, and symbols themselves of vigorous generative power, recovered their vigor. The birds mated and builded their nests, the seeds germinated, the grass grew, and the trees put forth leaves. With the summer solstice, when the sun reached the extreme northern limit of his course, came great beat, and burning winds, and lassitude and exhaustion. Then vegetation withered. Man longed for the cool breezes of spring and autumn and the cool water of the wintry Nile or Euphrates, and the lion sought for that element far from his home in the desert. With the autumnal equinox came ripe harvests, and fruits of the tree and vine, and falling leaves, and cold evenings presaging wintry frosts, and the principle and powers of darkness, prevailing over those of light, drove the sun further to the south, so that the nights grew longer than the days, and at the winter solstice the earth was wrinkled with fruit, the trees were leafless, and the sun, reaching the most southern point in his career, seemed to hesitate whether to continue descending, to leave the world to darkness and despair, or to turn upon his steps and retrace his course to the northward, bringing back seed time and spring, and green leaves and flowers and all the delights of love. Thus, naturally and necessarily, time was divided, first into days, and then into moons or months, and years, and with these divisions and the movements of the heavenly bodies that marked them, were associated and connected all men's physical enjoyments and privations, wholly agricultural, and in their frail habitations greatly at the mercy of the elements and the changing seasons. The primitive people of the Orient were most deeply interested in the recurrence of the periodical phenomena presented by the two great luminaries of heaven, on whose regularity all their prosperity depended, and the attentive observer soon noticed that the smaller lights of heaven were, apparently, even more regular than the sun and moon, and foretold with unerring certainty, by their risings and settings, the periods of recurrence of the different phenomena and seasons on which the physical well-being of all men depended. They soon felt the necessity of distinguishing the individual stars or groups of stars, and giving them names, that they might understand each other, when referring to and designating them. Necessity produced designations at once natural and artificial. Observing that, in the circle of the year, the renewal and periodical appearance of the productions of the earth were constantly associated, not only with the courses of the sun, but also with the rising and setting of certain stars, and with their position relatively to the sun, the center to which they referred the whole starry host. The mind naturally connected the celestial and terrestrial objects that were in fact connected, and they commenced by giving to particular stars or groups of stars the names of those terrestrial objects which seemed connected with them, and for those which still remained unnamed by this nomenclature, they, to complete a system, assumed arbitrary and fanciful names. Thus the Ethiopian of Thebes or Saba styled those stars under which the Nile commenced to overflow, stars of inundation, or that poured out the water, Aquarius. Those stars among which the sun was, when he had reached the northern tropic and began to retreat southward, were termed, from his retrograde motion, the Crab, Cancer. As he approached, in autumn, the middle point between the northern and southern extremes of his journeying, the days and nights became equal, and the stars among which he was then found, were called stars of the balance, Libra. Those stars among which the sun was, when the lion, driven from the desert by thirst, came to slake it at the Nile, were called stars of the lion, Leo. Those among which the sun was at harvest, were called those of the gleaning virgin, holding a sheaf of wheat, Virgo. Those among which he was found in February, when the ewes brought their young, were called stars of the lamb, Aries. Those in March, when it was time to plough, were called stars of the ox, Taurus. Those under which hot and burning winds came from the desert, venomous like poisonous reptiles, were called stars of the scorpion, Scorpio. Observing that the annual return of the rising of the Nile was always accompanied by the appearance of a beautiful star, which at that period showed itself in the direction of the sources of that river, and seemed to warn the husbandman to be careful not to be surprised by the inundation, the Ethiopian compared this act of that star to that of the animal which by barking gives warning of danger, and styled it the dog, Sirius. Thus commencing, and as astronomy came to be more studied, imaginary figures were traced all over the heavens, to which the different stars were assigned. Chief among them were those that lay along the path which the sun traveled as he climbed towards the north and descended to the south, lying within certain limits and extending to an equal distance on each aid of the line of equal nights and days. This belt, curving like a serpent, was termed the zodiac, and divided into 12 signs. At the vernal equinox, 2455 years before our era, the sun was entering the sign and constellation Taurus, or the bull, having passed through, since he commenced, at the winter solstice, to ascend northward, the signs Aquarius, Pisces and Aries, on entering the first of which he reached the lowest limit of his journey southward. From Taurus, he passed through Gemini and Cancer, and reached Leo, when he arrived at the terminus of his journey northward. Thence through Leo, Virgo, and Libra, he entered Scorpio, at the autumnal equinox, and journeyed southward through Scorpio, Sagittarius, and Capricornus, to Aquarius, the terminus of his journey south. The path by which he journeyed through these signs, became the ecliptic, and that which passes through the two equinoxes, the equator. They knew nothing of the immutable laws of nature, and whenever the sun commenced to tend southward, they feared lest he might continue to do so, and by degrees disappear forever, leaving the earth to be ruled forever by darkness, storm and cold. Hence they rejoiced when he commenced to reascend after the winter solstice, struggling against the malign influences of Aquarius and Pisces, and amicably received by the Lamb, and when at the vernal equinox he entered Taurus, they still more rejoiced at the assurance that the days would again be longer than the nights, that the season of seedtime bad come, and the summer and harvest would follow, and they lamented when, after the autumnal equinox, the malign influence of the venomous scorpion, the vindictive archer and the filthy and ill-omened lygoat dragged him down towards the winter solstice. Arriving there, they said he had been slain, and had gone to the realm of darkness. Remaining the 3 days, he rose again, and again ascended northward in the heavens, to redeem the earth from the gloom and darkness of winter, which soon became emblematical of sin and evil and suffering, as the spring, summer, and autumn became emblems of happiness and immortality. Soon they personified the sun, and worshipped him under the name of Osiris, and transmuted the legend of his descent among the winter signs into a fable of his death, his descent into the infernal regions, and his resurrection. The moon became Isis, the wife of Osiris, and winter, as well as the desert or the ocean into which the sun descended, became Typhon, the spirit or principle of evil, warring against and destroying Osiris. From the journey of the sun through the 12 signs came the legend of the 12 labors of Hercules, and the incarnations of Vishnu and Buddha. Hence came the legend of the murder of Hiram, representative of the sun, by the 3 fellow crafts, symbols of the 3 winter signs, Capricornus, Aquarius, and Pisces, who assailed him at the 3 gates of heaven and slew him at the winter solstice. Hence the search for him by the 9 fellow crafts, the other 9 signs, his finding, burial and resurrection. The celestial Taurus, opening the new year, was the creative bull of the Hinds and Japanese, breaking with his horn, the egg out of which the world is born. Hence the bull arts was worshipped by the Egyptians, and reproduced as a golden calf, by Aaron in the desert. Hence the cow was sacred to the Hindus. Hence, from the sacred and beneficent signs of Taurus and Leo, the human-headed winged lions and bulls in the palaces at Kuyunjik and Nimrud, like which were the cherubim, set by Solomon, in his temple, and hence the 12 brazen, or bronze oxen, on which the lava of brass was supported. The celestial vulture or eagle, rising and setting with the scorpion, was substituted in its place, in many cases, on account of the malign influences of the latter, and thus the 4 great periods of the year were marked by the bull, the lion, the man, Aquarius, and the eagle, which were upon the respective standards of Ephraim, Judah, Reuben, and Dan, and still appear on the shield of American Royal Arch Masonry. Afterwards the ram, or lamb, became an object of adoration. When, his turn, he opened the equinox, to deliver the world from the wintry reign of darkness and evil, around the central and simple idea of the annual death and resurrection of the sun, a multitude of circumstantial details soon clustered. Some were derived from other astronomical phenomena, while many were merely poetical ornaments and inventions. Besides the sun and moon, those ancients also saw a beautiful star, shining with a soft, silvery light, always following the sun, at no great distance when he set, or preceding him when he rose, another of a red and angry color, and still another more kingly and brilliant than all. Early attracted their attention by their free movements among the fixed hosts of heaven, and the latter by his unusual brilliancy, and the regularity with which he rose and set. These were Venus, Mars, and Jupiter. Mercury and Saturn could scarcely have been noticed in the world's infancy, or until astronomy began to assume the proportions of a science. In the projection of the celestial sphere by the astronomical priests, the zodiac and constellations, arranged in a circle, presented their halves in diametrical opposition, and the hemisphere of winter was said to be adverse, opposed, contrary, to that of summer. Over the angels of the latter ruled a king Osiris, or Ormuzd, enlightened, intelligent, creative and beneficent. Over the fallen angels or evil genii of the former, the demons or deaths, of the subterranean empire of darkness and sorrow, and its stars, ruled also a chief in Egypt. The scorpion first ruled, the sign next the balance, and long the chief of the winter signs, and then the polar bear, or ass, called Typhon, that is, deluge, on account of the rains which inundated the earth while that constellation domineered. In Persia, at a later day, it was the serpent, which, personified as Ahriman, was the evil principle of the religion of Zoroaster. The sun does not arrive at the same moment in each year on the equinoctial point on the equator. The explanation of his anticipating that point belongs to the science of astronomy, and to that we refer you for it. The consequence is what is termed the precession of the equinoxes, by means of which the sun is constantly changing his place in the zodiac at each vernal equinox, so that now, the signs retaining the names which they had 300 years before Christ, they and the constellations do not correspond, the sun being now in the constellation Pisces, when he is in the sign Aries. The annual amount of precession is 50 seconds and a little over 51. The period of a complete revolution of the equinoxes, 25,336 years. The precession amounts to 30 or a sign, in 2,155.6 years, so that, as vernal equinox, summer solstice, autumn equinox, winter solstice, the sun now enters Pisces. At the vernal equinox, he entered Aries, at that period, 300 years BC, and Taurus, 2455 BC, and the division of the ecliptic, now called Taurus, lies in the constellation Aries, while the sign Gemini is in the constellation Taurus. 4,610 years before Christ, the sun entered Gemini at the vernal equinox. At the two periods, 2,455 and 300 years before Christ, and now, the entrances of the sun at the equinoxes and solstices into the signs, were and are as follows. "28th degree, night of the sun, or night adept." The primitive idea of infinite space existed in the first men, as it exists in us. It, and the idea of infinite time are the two first innate ideas. Man cannot conceive how things can be added to things, or event follow event, forever. The idea will ever return, that no matter how long bulk is added to bulk, there must be, still beyond, an empty void, without limit, in which is nothing. In the same way the idea of time without beginning or end forces itself on him. Time, without events, is also a void, and nothing. In that empty void space the primitive men knew there was no light, nor warmth. They felt what we know scientifically, that there must be a thick darkness there, and an intensity of cold of which we have no conception. Into that void they thought the sun, the planets and the stars, went down when they set under the western horizon. Darkness was to them an enemy, a harm, a vague dread and terror. It was the very embodiment of the evil principle, and out of it they said that he was formed. As the sun bent southward towards that void, they shuddered with dread, and when at the winter solstice, he again commenced his northward march they rejoiced and feasted, as they did at the summer solstice, when most he appeared to smile upon them in his pride of place. Those days have been celebrated by all civilized nations ever since. The Christian has made them feast days of the Church, and appropriated them to the two Saints John, and Masonry has done the same. We, to whom the vast universe has become but a great machine, not instinct with a great sawyer, but a clockwork, of proportions unimaginable, but still infinitely less than infinite, and part at least of which we with our aurics can imitate, we, who have measured the distances and dimensions, and learned the specific gravity and determined the orbits of the moon, and the planets, we, who know the distance to the sun, and his size, have measured the orbits of the flashing comet, and the distances of the fixed stars, and know the latter to be suns, like our sun, each with his retinue of worlds, and all governed by the same unerringly mechanical laws and outwardly imposed forces, centripetal and centrifugal. We, that with our telescopes have separated the galaxy and the nebula, into other stars and groups of stars, discovered new planets, by first discovering their disturbing forces upon those already known, and learned that they all, Jupiter, Venus, and the fiery Mars, and Saturn, and the others, as well as the bright, mild and ever-changing moon, are mere dark, dull, opaque clouds like our Earth, and not living orbs, of brilliant fire and heavenly light. We, who have counted the mountains and chasms in the moon, with glasses that could distinctly reveal to us the Temple of Solomon, if it stood there in its old original glory, we, who no longer imagine that the stars control our destinies, and who can calculate the eclipses of the sun and moon, backward and forward, for 10,000 years, we, with our vastly increased conceptions of the powers of the grand architect of the universe, but our wholly material and mechanical view of that universe itself we cannot even in the remotest degree feel, though we may partially and imperfectly imagine, how those great, primitive, simple-hearted children of nature felt in regard to the starry hosts, there upon the slopes of the Himalayas, on the Chaldean plains, in the Persian and Median deserts, and upon the banks of that great, strange river the Nile. To them the universe was alive, instinct with forces and powers, mysterious and beyond their comprehension. To them it was no machine, no great system of clockwork, but a great, live creature, an army of creatures, in sympathy with or inimical to man. To them, all was a mystery and a miracle, and the stars, clashing overhead, spoke to their hearts almost in an audible language. Jupiter, with his kingly splendors, was the emperor of the starry legions. Venus looked lovingly on the earth, and blessed it. Mars, with his crimson fires, threatened war and misfortune, and Saturn, cold and grave, chilled and repelled them. The ever-changing moon, faithful companion of the sun, was a constant miracle and wonder. The sun, himself the visible emblem of the creative and generative power. To them the earth was great plain, over which the sun, the moon and the planets revolved, its servants, framed to gyro-id light of the stars. Some were beneficent existences that brought with them springtime and fruits and flowers, some, faithful sentinels, advising them of coming inundation, of the season of storm and of deadly winds, some heralds of evil, which steadily foretelling they seemed to cause. To them the eclipses were portents of evil, and their causes hidden in mystery, and supernatural. The regular returns of the stars, the comings of Arcturus, Orion, Sirius, the Pleiades, and Aldebaran, and the journeyings of the sun, were voluntary and not mechanical. To them, what wonder that astronomy became to them the most important of sciences, that those who learnt it became rulers, and that vast edifices, the pyramids, the tower or temple of Bel, and other like erections everywhere in the East, were builded for astronomical purposes. And what wonder that, in their great childlike simplicity they worshipped light, the sun, the planets, and the stars, and personified them, and eagerly believed in the histories invented for them. In that age, when the capacity for belief was infinite, as indeed, if we but reflect, it still is and ever will be, though Masonry is identical with the ancient mysteries, it is so in this qualified sense, that it presents but an imperfect image of their brilliancy, the ruins only of their grandeur, and a system that has experienced progressive alterations, the fruits of social events and political circumstances. Upon leaving Egypt, the mysteries were modified by the habits of the different nations among whom they were introduced. Though originally more moral and political than religious, they soon became the heritage, as it were, of the priests, and essentially religious, though in reality limiting the sacerdotal power, by teaching the intelligent laity the folly and absurdity of the creeds of the populace. They were therefore necessarily changed by the religious systems of the countries into which they were transplanted. In Greece, they were the mysteries of cause; in Rome, of Bonadia, the good goddess; in Gaul, the school of Mars; in Sicily, the Academy of the Sciences. Among the Hebrews, they partook of the rites and ceremonies of a religion which placed all the powers of government and all the knowledge in the hands of the priests and Levites. The pagodas of India, the retreats of the Magi of Persia and Chaldea, and the pyramids of Egypt were no longer the sources at which men drank in knowledge. Each people, at all informed, had its mysteries. After a time the temples of Greece and the school of Pythagoras lost their reputation, and Freemasonry took their place. Masonry, when properly expounded, is at once the interpretation of the great book of nature, the recital of physical and astronomical phenomena, the purest philosophy, and the place of deposit, where, as in a treasury, are kept in safety all the great truths of the primitive revelation that form the basis of all religions. In the modern degrees, three things are to be recognized: the image of primeval times, the tableau of the efficient causes of the universe, and the book in which are written the morality of all peoples, and the code by which they must govern themselves if they would be prosperous. The first degree represents man, when he had sunken from his original lofty estate into what is most improperly styled a state of nature. He represents in that degree the rough ashlar, unfit to form a part of the spiritual temple, the pagan, who had lost all the great primitive truths of the original revelation. He maintained the same character in the ancient mysteries. He is emphatically a profane, enveloped in darkness, poor and destitute of spiritual knowledge, and emblematically naked. The material darkness, which is produced by the bandage over his eyes, is an emblem of the darkness of his soul. He is deprived of everything that has a value, and wherewith he could purchase food, to indicate his utter destitution of the mental wealth of primitive truth. In this degree he undergoes only physical tests, and receives elementary moral instruction. As yet, he takes upon himself no duty but secrecy. He still remains in a dark quarter of the lodge, though not in the north, but halfway towards the east, the place of light. Okay, to the reader, the verse that you should remember is: the pagodas of India, the retreats of the Magi of Persia and Chaldea, and the pyramids of Egypt were no longer the sources at which men drank in knowledge. Exodus 20:26. In every place where I record my name, I will come to you and bless you. But if you make an altar of stone to me, it shall not be of cut stones, for if you carve with a cutter upon it, then it will be polluted, and you shall not pile up pyramids for an altar, so that your nakedness may not be discovered when you go up to it. 24th degree, Prince of the Tabernacle. The Logos, being the world of ideas, by means whereof God has created visible things, he is the most ancient God, in comparison with the world which is the youngest production. The Logos, chief of intelligences, of which he is the general representative, is named Archangel, tips and representative of all spirits, even those of mortals. He is also styled the man type and primitive man. God only is wise. The wisdom of man is but the reflection and image of that of God. He is the Father, and his wisdom, the mother of creation, for he united himself with wisdom, and communicated to it the germ of creation, and it brought forth the material world. He created the ideal world only, and caused the material world to be made real after its type, by his Logos, which is his speech, and at the same time the idea of ideas. The intellectual world, the intellectual city was but the thought of the architect, who meditated the creation, according to that plan of the material city. The Word is not only the creator, but occupies the place of the Supreme Being. Through him all the powers and attributes of God act on the other side, as first representative of the human family. He is the protector of men and their shepherd. God gives to man the soul or intelligence, which exists before the body, and which he unites with the body. The reasoning principle comes from God through the Word, and communes with God and with the Word. But there is also in man an irrational principle, that of the inclinations and passions, which produce disorder, emanating from inferior spirits who fill the air as ministers of God. The body, taken from the earth, and the irrational principle that animates it concurrently with the rational principle, are hated by God, while the rational soul, which He has given it, is as it were, captive in this prison, this coffin, that encompasses it. The present condition of man is not his primitive condition. When he was the image of the Logos, he has fallen from his first estate, but he may raise himself again, by following the directions of wisdom, and of the angels, which God has commissioned to aid him, in freeing himself from the bonds of the body, and combating evil, the existence whereof God has permitted, to furnish him the means of exercising his liberty. The souls, that are purified, not by the law but by light, rise to the heavenly regions, to enjoy there a perfect felicity. Those that persevere in evil go from body to body, the seats of passions and evil desires. The familiar lineaments of these doctrines will be recognized by all who read the epistles of St. Paul, who wrote after Philo, the latter living in the reign of Caligula, and being the contemporary of Christ. And the Mason is familiar with these doctrines of Philo, that the Supreme Being is a center of light whose rays, or emanations, pervade the universe, for that is the light for which all Masonic journeys are a search, and of which the sun and moon, in our lodges, are only emblems that light and that darkness, chief enemies from the beginning of time, dispute with each other the empire of the world, which we symbolize. You are taught by this mystery. It was said to him, that the heathen gods are unrealities, and mere ideal personifications either of the heavenly bodies, of the powers of nature, or of the principles of light, and darkness, and good, and evil. The Egyptians, Phoenicians, Chaldean, and Philistines, have thus given to the sun, the moon, the stars, heaven, earth, the sky, light, fire, the air, and the sea, personal characteristics, and names. They worship the powers of nature, in the constellations, and the constellations, in the animal's image there. The idol is mere wood and stone, the representation of an unreal ideality. Our people, prone to idol worship, are forbidden to make to themselves any symbol, or idol, of the deity. There is but one only true God, who bath no bodily shape, nor bath beneaces of any man. He is not the light, nor fire, but pure absolute intellect, and existence, the soul, and spirit, of the universe, which he created with a thought. The past, the present, and the illimitable future, the infinite series of events and successions, of time in both directions, are all present to him at one and the same moment. There is to him no future, and no past, present everywhere. There is to him neither then nor elsewhere. Everything to him is here and now. He is unchangeable, immutable, infinitely just, wise, and powerful. He can neither be angry nor repent. What we term his punishments are but the inevitable results, that by his great laws of cause and effect, the corollaries from universal harmony, flow from and follow sin and crime. The soul is immortal, the body, perishing, dissolves into atoms, infinitely small, and mingles again with nature, and forms new bodies, of man, and living things below man, and the vegetable creation. The soul, a spark of the universal soul, imprisoned in the body, becomes solid with the body's imperfections, and must be purified, before it can return and mingle again with the universal source. It is immortal, not of necessity, but unless God pleases, as it and all things emanated from him, to absorb it again into himself. No sin that man commits will go unpunished, and after death, the soul will feel the results of its sins and errors here, by a law as inflexible as that which holds the stars to their courses. You are also taught how constant is the struggle in every man's nature, between the divine will, implanted in every man by God, and the natural will, prone to vice and error, and caused by the frailty of the flesh. Osiris, and Typhon, Ormuzd, and Ahriman, Vishnu, and Shiva, make of every human soul, as they do of the world and universe, a battlefield. All the universe coheres. The struggle between material light and darkness is more than a symbol of that between good and evil. It is in the truest sense the same. Such is the law of harmony. The contest is one, and it goes on under different forms, in the universe and all its parts. It will henceforward be your duty to seek full instruction in these great mysteries, which the mass of the people are incapable of understanding. To them, material images of God will ever be indispensable. One religion after another will spring up, and grow for a time, and decay and die, and give place to another. The framers and a select few will know the great primitive truths, which must be the foundations of all religions, but the people will ever worship idols, and images, either carved of wood and stone, or found on earth, and in this sense, as presiding over life and death, Dionysus is in the highest sense the liberator, since, like Osiris, he frees the soul, and guides it in its migrations beyond the grave, preserving it from the risk of again falling under the slavery of matter or of some inferior animal form, the purgatory of metempsychosis, and exalting and perfecting its nature through the purifying discipline of his mysteries, the great consummation of all philosophy, said Socrates, professedly quoting from traditional and mystic sources, is death who pursues philosophy aright, is studying how to die. All soul is part of the universal soul, whose totality is Dionysus, and it is therefore he who, as spirit of spirits, leads back the vagrant spirit to its home, and accompanies it through the purifying processes, both real and symbolical, of its earthly transit. He is therefore emphatically the Allysis, or Hierophant, the great spiritual mediator of Greek religion. The human soul is itself a god within the mind, capable through its own power of rivaling the canonization of the hero, of making itself immortal, by the practice of the good, and the contemplation of the beautiful and true. The removal to the Happy Islands could only be understood mythically. Everything earthly must die. Man, like Oedipus, is wounded from his birth. His real Elysium can exist only beyond the grave. Dionysus died and descended to the shades. His passion was the great secret of the mysteries, as death is the grand mystery of existence. His death, typical of nature's death, or of her periodical decay and restoration, was one of the many symbols of the palingenesis or second birth of man. Man, descended from the elemental forces or titans, Elohim, who fed on the body of the pantheistic deity creating the universe by self-sacrifice, commemorates in sacramental observance this mysterious passion, and while partaking of the raw flesh of the victim, seems to be invigorated by a fresh draught from the fountain of universal life, to receive a new pledge of regenerated existence. Death is the inseparable antecedent of life. The seed dies, in order to produce the plant, and earth itself is rent asunder and dies at the birth of Dionysus, hence the significancy of the phallus, or of its inoffensive substitute the obelisk, rising as an emblem of resurrection, by the tomb of buried deity at Lorna, or at say Dionysus. Orpheus descended to the shades to recover the lost virgin of the zodiac, to bring back his mother to the sky as Thyone, or what has the same meaning, to consummate his eventful marriage with Persephone, thereby securing, like the nuptials of his father with Samael, or Danae, the perpetuity of nature. His under-earth office is the depression of the year, the wintry aspect in the alternations of bull and serpent, whose united series makes up the continuity of time, and in which, physically speaking, the stern and dark are ever the parents of the beautiful and bright. 26th degree Prince of Mercy or Scottish Trinitarian, Jesus of Nazareth, the deity incarnate, or the Son of God, or an inspired prophet, or a pure, noble-hearted wise man, whichever according to your faith and mine, he may have been, is the expounder of the new law of love. He calls to him the humble, the poor, the pariahs of the world. The first sentence that he pronounces blesses the world, and announces the new gospel. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. He pours the oil of comfort upon every crushed and bleeding heart. Every sufferer is his proselyte. He shares our sorrows, and sympathizes with all our afflictions. He raises up the sinner and teaches him to hope for forgiveness. He pardons the woman taken in adultery. He selects his disciples not among the Pharisees or the philosophers, but among the low and humble, even of the fishermen of Galilee. He heals the sick and feeds the poor. He lives among the destitute and the friendless. Suffer little children, he said, to come unto me, for as such is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the humble-minded, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The meek, for they shall inherit the earth. The merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. The pure in heart, for they shall see God. The peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. First be reconciled to thy brother, and then come and offer thy gift at the altar. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow of thee turn not away. Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. All thing whatsoever you would that men should do to you, do ye also unto them, for this is the law and the prophets. He that taketh not his cross, and followeth after me, is not worthy of me. And now commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another, as I have loved you, that ye also love one another. By this shall all know that ye are my disciples. Greater love bath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. The gospel of love he sealed with his life. The cruelty of the Jewish priesthood, and the Roman indifference to barbarian blood, nailed him to the cross, and he expired uttering blessings upon humanity. Dying thus, he bequeathed his teachings to man as an inestimable inheritance. Perverted and corrupted, they have served as a basis for many creeds, and been even made the warrant for intolerance and persecution. We here teach them in their purity. They are our masonry, for to them good men of all creeds can subscribe, that God is good and merciful, and loves and sympathizes with the creatures he has made, that big finger is visible in all the movements of the moral, intellectual and material universe, that we are his children, the objects of his paternal care and regard, that all men are our brothers, whose wants we are to supply, their errors to pardon, their opinions to tolerate, their injuries to forgive, that man has an immortal soul, a free will, a right to freedom of thought and action, that all men are equal in God's sight, that we be to serve God by humility, meekness, gentleness, kindness, and the other virtues which the lowly can practice as well as the lofty. This is the new law, the word, for which the world had waited and pined so long, and every true Knight of the Rose will revere the memory of him who taught it, and look indulgently even on those who assign to him a character far above his own conceptions or belief, even to the extent of deeming him divine. Here Philo, the Greek Jew, the contemplative soul, unequally guided, sometime towards abundance and sometimes towards barrenness, though ever advancing, is illuminated by the primitive ideas, the rays that emanate from the divine intelligence, whenever it ascends towards the sublime treasures. When, on the contrary, it descends, and is barren, it falls within the domain of those intelligences that are termed angels. For, when the soul is deprived of the light of God, which leads it to the knowledge of things, it no longer enjoys more than a feeble and secondary light, which gives it, not the understanding of things, but that of words only, as in this baser world. Let the narrow-souled withdraw, having their ears sealed up, we communicate the divine mysteries. C.O. those only who have received the sacred initiation, to those who practice true piety, and who are not enslaved by the empty pomp of words, or the doctrines of the pagans. The Book of Revelation 22:12. Behold, I come soon, and my wages are with me, to pay to each as his own work is. I, the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. Happy are those who wash their robes, so that they may be allowed to approach the tree of life, and enter into the city by its gates. Outside are the dogs, and the magicians, and the fornicators, and the murderers, and the idolaters, and every one loving and making a lie. I, Jesus, have sent my messenger to you, to declare these events in the assemblies. I am the root and the offspring of David, the radiant, the morning star. The Book of Revelation 2:25. I will impose no other burden upon you, except that which you have. Keep it safe until I come. The conqueror also, and the keeper of my institutions to the end, to him I will give a governorship over the heathen. He shall shape them with an iron rod, as vessels of clay are tempered together, as I myself was instructed by my Father. And I will present to him the morning star. The Book of Revelation 16:12. Then the sixth emptied his vial upon the mighty river Euphrates, and its water was dried up, so that a road might be prepared for the kings from the rising sun